What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Marvell stock, ticker symbol MRVL, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Thursday, March 7th. Alright guys, Marvell stock here today, up $2.64 a share, 3.35% in regular trading hours, essentially flat here in the after hours. Let's take a look here. What I want to do on this name, of course, we have earnings tomorrow, that's Thursday, after the closing bell, so make sure you're aware of that. But this is, of course, the 1-minute chart. Let's start here with our daily ritual, our volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. By the way, if you are new here, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is to hit 5,000 subscribers. I greatly appreciate you climbing aboard here, and I'll do my best to continue to provide free value every single day. So you know what we're looking for here if you've been here for any period of time. I'm looking for big jumps in volume that correlate with obvious moves in stock price, the most obvious moves on the day, but it has to be outside of what would be considered normal, contextual for that particular time of day. So I think the obvious moves here that I want to look at are there, maybe this little pop here intraday, and then this fade and recovery into the close. So let's go through them kind of like one by one, just quickly here. You see this fade kind of early in the morning, 4 red bars in a row. The volume was almost lower than average, so we can go ahead and immediately get rid of that. Sorry, bears. This upside move that we got kind of like later morning, okay, at least in New York. Honestly, the volume was so contextual. We typically expect to see this U shape, right? Now this volume later on here, it's likely that we saw maybe some fund activity, some rebalancing, but we'll get to that in a second. This here, on this second move that we wanted to look at, the volume is contextual. So, you know, we're going to have to go ahead and get rid of that one as well. Now, this third upside move, I mean, yeah, we started to get a little bit of a pop, but it just wasn't consistent enough. We're going to have to get rid of that one too. Now, this last move, heading into the end of the day here, we got that fade and then recovery, essentially equal moves. Okay, down and up to basically where we started. However, the reason we're looking at this is because we can get a bigger sample size that says, okay, these two moves were not really created equal. That's ultimately what I'm after here. You can see here that the move on the downside was very contextual based on the time of day. However, I would argue that since we typically expect higher volume off the open and then a U shape, with almost always is the case, by the way, the closing candle is going to typically be lower than the opening candle. You know, it's very common, I shouldn't say almost always, but it's very common to see that being the case. But however, we saw the closing candle exceeding the opening candle, and then the immediate after hours candle, which is oftentimes fund, institution, rebalancing activity, was of course, you know, over 2.2 million shares. It was the first one to break 1 million shares, and it hit 2.2. So, yeah, I mean, undoubtedly so, being especially that we've now held this move into the after hours, which again, take after hours with a grain of salt. The volume is low, but it's not like we saw a big fade or something after what was likely that rebalance or just position altering volume from a fund or an institution or a variety. I'm going to go ahead and give that close to the bulls, even though it was, you know, it was a 3.35% day, not the craziest day for Marvell, but you know, I'll take it, especially with that close. Now, let's move on and take a look at the self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels that I'm going to be watching tomorrow's trading day as we head into the report after the bell. So you can see here that back here on the 5th, that would have been Tuesday there. Okay, yesterday, if you're watching this still on Wednesday. We struggled with that 50 period. All right, but today, Wednesday, we essentially treated it as, it was a little bit sloppy, of course, but I'm never expecting perfect. We essentially treated that level as an ascending support level. So here's what I'm looking at in terms of that incredibly heavily used 50 period moving average here on the very popular 30-minute chart tomorrow. If I'm looking at this with a bullish perspective, I want to see any test of that bounce as quickly as possible on as much volume as possible. Okay, and if I'm looking at this chart with a bearish perspective, my priority number 1 on the 30-minute tomorrow is to crack downside below the 50 period, especially considering 80s right beneath there, right? On as much volume as possible. A downside break on below average volume, bulls also pay attention to this, for me, is not all that convincing. I want a big sample size letting you know that the market agrees with that bounce or break. Okay, now let's move on to the 4-hour chart and take a look. Now, this is one of the primary issues, okay, with having a big upside move so quickly like we've seen on MRVL as of late. Those psychological barriers that can kind of help out, they take their time, especially when you get to the 4-hour, and then especially on the daily chart, they're going to take longer to get up underneath the move. And I want, if I'm a bull, as many psychological barriers, at least potential barriers, getting as close to the stock as it's rising as possible. Because a lot of bears understand this, bulls. A lot of bears are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, the stock's essentially floating on midair. And that's why I think it's always so important to consider, almost more so, the opposite side of your trade's sentiment. So bulls, always understand the bearish side, almost more than your own side. It's easy to understand your own side. Feels good to only confirm your own bias. But if you can start to understand why the bears are bearish, it gives you that much more power in your own position. So if I'm a bull on the 4-hour chart, listen, really all I'm looking for is that 50 period to continue at an accelerated rate moving upside. And if I'm a bear, I would love to see that thing flatten out ahead of like 75 bucks a share, ideally. All right. Now, the most important chart of all, especially as we head into tomorrow, is going to be the daily. Now, on the daily, you guys know what I'm looking for, right? I don't want to overcomplicate this. The daily is no time to show off. This is the time to get really, really simple, really contextual, and break this down in as simple of a way as we possibly can, because I want the story that the most people are watching. Psychology. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Right? So what is it, right? You can probably tell me before I even say it. For me, it's 80 bucks a share. Okay, if I'm a bull, I want to see a hard hold of 80 bucks a share, which has acted as both a resistance and a support just in the last 3 trading days now. Any downside test of 80, I want to see a hard hold on high volume and pull away, attempting to get up through that recent high that we saw today of 82.51, heading up toward 85. Okay? Bears. You're worried about really one thing. Ideally, don't give it up. Well, 2 things. Ideally, don't give up another all-time high. Or recent high, I should say, today. We have actually been higher than this briefly in the past. But really, get down below 80 bucks a share is the primary concern if you're a bear. Now, all this probably has you wondering as we head into earnings, like, hey, is there any bias that we can pull out today? You know me, there absolutely is. Let's take a look. How are the options traders positioning themselves just from today as we head into earnings day tomorrow? Good sample size, 160,000 total contracts approximately traded today. Just under 115,000 of those were calls, and just under 45,000 of those were puts. So we are seeing a rather heavy call side bias here today. Now, if we break it down by average time frame, right, by looking at the delta ranges, every single delta range is leaning call side, including that 0 to 20 short-term speculator delta range, which has about 34,000 calls and about 23,000 puts today. Guys, I'm curious, before you head out, let me know in the comments section, are you trading this as an earnings trade, or are you buying this for the long term? I'm very curious with a company like this to know the answer to that. Let us know in the comment section down below. I will read all of them here today. And also on the way, listen, if you got value out of this video, please subscribe to the channel. Again, I'm trying to hit 5,000. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.